If you are someone who loves taking a massive pile of information, just sort of shaking it out and finding that one perfect, mind-blowing narrative to share at your next dinner party, you are in exactly the right place.
Oh, absolutely.
Today, we have a really special deep dive prepared just for you. We are looking at a document that, on the surface, might not sound like a thriller.
Right. It sounds a bit academic at first glance.
Yeah, exactly. It is essentially a comprehensive list detailing the United States senators from New Mexico over the last century or so. And I know what you might be thinking.
A giant list of politicians.
Right. A registry of names, dates, political parties, congressional classes. It usually looks like a dry spreadsheet. It seems like a kind of thing you might cram into your brain for a high school history test and then immediately flesh out. But, okay, let's unpack this. Because hiding right there in the rows and columns of this timeline is an incredible story of evolution.
It really is.
We are talking about intense, hidden political drama, a completely bizarre game of senatorial musical chairs, and a staggering amount of early turnover that you simply would not expect from the highest legislative body in the country.
It really is a phenomenal data set to analyze when you look past the raw text. This isn't just a static timeline or a simple registry of politicians who went to Washington.
No, not at all.
It is actually the living, breathing story of a state trying to find its political footing over the course of a century. When you take a magnifying glass to the specific dates, the sudden gaps, and the highly unusual reasons these individuals left office, you start to see the severe growing pains of a brand new state.
Yeah, the growing pains are so obvious.
You see the massive shift in its political identity over the decades, and you witness the very mechanics of American democracy playing out, sometimes quite clumsily, in real time. We're going to guide you through exactly what those numbers and dates mean for the people who actually lived through them.
And to really understand those growing pains, we have to start right at the very beginning of the timeline, because the bumpiness of this road is incredibly obvious from day one.
Oh, absolutely. Day one is a mess.
There is a fascinating quirk right at the top of the timeline regarding the very inception of the state. So New Mexico was officially admitted to the Union and became a state on January 6, 1912.
Right.
That is obviously a massive historic day for the people living there, but if you track the timeline for their Senate representation, the seats sit completely vacant until March 27, 1912.
What's fascinating here is that 2.5-month gap. You have a brand new state, finally admitted to the Union after a long and complicated territorial period, and yet, for its first 80 days of official statehood.
80 days.
Exactly. 80 days where it has absolutely zero representation in the United States Senate. It highlights a really unique administrative lag that we don't often think about when states join the Union.
We just assume it's instant.
Right. But the state had to literally build its political infrastructure and hold its elections after the fact. So during those crucial first few months, when the federal government is passing laws that will affect this new state, New Mexico is totally voiceless in Washington.
Which brings up a technical detail that appears right there in the empty columns of 1912. The timeline explicitly divides the empty seats into Class 1 and Class 2.
Yes.
Since this concept dictates the entire rhythm of the timeline we are about to explore, we should probably establish what that actually means for the voters.
This raises an important question. What exactly are these senatorial classes, and why are they assigned immediately upon statehood? The U.S. Senate is deliberately divided into 3 separate classes, so that only about 1/3 of the senators across the entire country are up for election at any given time.
To keep things stable.
Exactly. It is a system designed to ensure long-term stability in the chamber, preventing a scenario where the entire Senate could be voted out and replaced in a single sweeping election.
That makes sense.
So when a new state like New Mexico enters the Union, they don't just get 2 generic senators. They are specifically assigned to 2 of those 3 existing classes to integrate them into that staggered national election cycle.
And for New Mexico, they were assigned Class 1 and Class 2.
Precisely.
So they had to be slotted into the existing federal machinery. So finally, March 27 rolls around, the administrative lag is over, and New Mexico gets its very first congressional delegation.
The seats are filled.
Right. In the Class 1 seat, you have Thomas B. Catron, and in the Class 2 seat, you have Albert B. Fall. Both of these men are Republicans. You would think that finally getting 2 bodies into those seats would solve the early chaos, but the timeline shows things actually get much weirder.
Oh, it gets so much weirder.
Let's trace the tenure of Albert B. Fall. He is elected in 1912, but his entry comes with a wild footnote. The state legislature actually invalidated his election.
Just threw it out.
Threw it out. He was literally forced to be reelected in 1913 just to continue into the next term.
The logistical nightmare of that situation is staggering. It is a remarkable detail that shows just how turbulent the early political environment was in Santa Fe.
Clearly.
The rules, the procedures, and the power dynamics between the local legislature and the federal representatives were still being actively fought over. Having a state legislature invalidate the election of its own newly minted U.S. senator points to some serious, behind-the-scenes political infighting.
It's wild to think about.
And that turbulence didn't stop once he secured his reelection. If you trace Albert B. Fall's timeline further down the chart, you see that he doesn't even finish his tenure in the Senate.
He doesn't even come close. He manages to get reelected in 1918, seemingly stabilizing his position. But then he abruptly resigns in March of 1921.
Just walks away.
Just walks away. And the reason for his resignation is a crucial data point here. He leaves to become the U.S. Secretary of the Interior.
Which establishes a very interesting precedent right out of the gate for New Mexico's political culture.
Yeah.
In this early era, the Senate seat wasn't necessarily viewed as the ultimate final destination for a politician.
Like it is today.
Right. It was often treated as a stepping stone to other federal appointments. Fall walking away from an elected position to join the president's cabinet was just the first of several early, voluntary departures we're going to see. It signals to the voters that their representation in Washington is highly fluid.
Highly fluid is almost an understatement when we move into the 1920s and 30s. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, boy. The
Because if the 1910s were defined by administrative delays and invalidated elections, the next 2 decades were defined by pure, unadulterated chaos.
Chaos is the right word.
The sheer number of vacancies, temporary appointments, the sudden deaths and resignations turns the Senate representation of New Mexico into a constantly revolving door. I want to carefully walk you through the absolute anomaly of the Class 1 seat in the late 1920s.
This is my favorite part of the data.
It is essentially a masterclass in political musical chairs. It is a timeline so convoluted you almost need to draw a map to follow it.
The sequence of events in that specific Class 1 seat over a 2-year period is one of the most volatile stretches of representation you will find in congressional history.
Let's break it down step by step for the listener. You have a Democrat named Andreas A. Jones. He brings a brief moment of stability, having been elected back in 1916 and then successfully re-elected in 1922.
Right, he was doing well.
But then the instability strikes. He dies in office on December 20th, 1927. So suddenly, the seat is vacant again. Just 9 days later, on December 29, a Republican named Bronson M. Cutting is appointed to continue the term.
But he doesn't stay long.
No. Cutting only holds on to the seat until December of 1928 because another Republican, Octaviano Larrazolo, is officially elected to finish out the remaining months of Jones's original term.
And this is where the timeline compresses dramatically. Larrazolo takes office on December 7th, 1928, but he only serves until March 3rd, 1929.
Less than 3 months.
Less than 3 months. The historical record notes that he retired due to illness, making his tenure incredibly brief even by the chaotic standards of early New Mexico politics.
Which leaves the seat open for the brand new term starting the very next day, March 4th, 1929. And who takes over?
Bronson M. Cutting.
Bronson M. Cutting. He comes right back like a boomerang, having won the 1928 general election for the full term. Let's just pause and put you in the shoes of an average voter during that 2-year span.
It would be so confusing.
In 1927, your senator is Andreas A. Jones. By early 1928, it's Bronson M. Cutting. By late 1928, it's Octaviano Larrazolo. And by early 1929, you are right back to Bronson M. Cutting. Keeping track of who is actually speaking for you in Washington, D.C. would have been a full-time job.
It creates a massive disconnect between the electorate and the federal government. And if you look closely at what happens next in the timeline, you spot a really striking pattern regarding why these senators were leaving.
Yeah, this part is fascinating.
We've already seen Albert B. Fall voluntarily leave the Senate for a cabinet position. But let's look at how Bronson M. Cutting's second stint in the Senate ultimately ends. He is reelected in 1930, seemingly securing his position. But then, on May 6, 1935, he resigns.
And his reason? To become a judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals.
Exactly.
And he wasn't the only one making that exact career move. If you look over at the Class 2 seat around the exact same time, you see an identical scenario play out.
A perfect parallel.
You have a Democrat named Sam G. Bratton. He was elected in 1924, successfully navigating the campaign trail. And what does he do? He resigns on June 24th, 1933. His reason is exactly the same as Cutting's. He leaves to become a judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals.
The parallelism there is deeply revealing. You have politicians participating in these grueling, high-stakes statewide elections, convincing the population to send them all the way to Washington, D.C. to represent a relatively new state.
It's a lot of work.
It is, and yet multiple senators are willingly trading that hard-won elected office for lifetime judicial appointments. They are systematically fleeing the legislative branch for the courts.
Fleeing is a great way to put it.
It paints a picture of a completely different political culture, where a seat on the appellate court was viewed as a more desirable or perhaps more influential post than serving in the United States Senate.
It is entirely alien to how we view the Senate today. Today, people spend hundreds of millions of dollars and dedicate their entire lives just to get one of those 100 seats.
Right.
Back then, they were treating it like a waiting room for a judgeship.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can clearly divide the entire history of New Mexico's Senate representation into two distinctly different eras.
Okay.
You have this early period of intense volatility that we've been discussing, the administrative gaps, the invalidated elections, the 3-month tenures, and the constant resignations for cabinet and judicial posts.
The revolving door.
The revolving door, exactly. But as we move out of the 1930s and into the mid to late 20th century, the timeline shows a massive structural shift. The revolving door completely stops.
It really does.
New Mexico transitions from an era of transient politicians into an era defined by absolute political titans who hold their seats for staggering lengths of time. Stability replaces chaos as the defining feature of the state's representation.
The sheer length of these later tenures is mind-boggling, especially when contrasted with guys who were serving for 90 days.
It's night and day.
Let's dive into the timelines of these multi-decade titans. Take Dennis Chavez, for example. He was a Democrat who was actually appointed in May 1935 to fill the vacancy left when Bronson M. Cutting resigned to become a judge.
Right. He steps to that gap.
Chavez goes on to be elected to finish that term in 1936. But he doesn't stop there. He is reelected in 1940, 1946, 1952, and 1958. He serves continuously until he dies in office in November 1962. We are talking about over 27 years in the United States Senate.
That kind of longevity fundamentally changes a state's relationship with the federal government. And Chavez wasn't an isolated case. Look at Clinton Anderson, another Democrat.
Oh, yeah, his numbers are huge.
He served a massive, uninterrupted stretch from January 1949 all the way to January 1973. That is 24 years of continuous representation. And jumping forward slightly, you have Jeff Bingaman, also a Democrat, who held his seat from January 1983 to January 2013.
A clean 30 years.
A clean 30 years in office.
Those numbers are huge, but incredibly, 30 years doesn't even get you the top spot on this list.
Not even close.
The ultimate record holder for the state of New Mexico is a Republican named Pete Domenici. He was elected to the Class II seat and served from January 3, 1973, all the way to January 3, 2009.
36 years.
That is 36 straight years in the United States Senate. He survived 6 separate re-election campaigns over the course of 4 different decades.
36 years of unbroken continuity is a profound political achievement. Think about what that practically means for a state's influence in Washington.
It must be massive.
It is. When a state evolves from having senators who barely unpack their bags before resigning to having individuals sitting in those same seats for 3 decades, it completely rewrites the power dynamic.
Because of seniority.
Yeah, exactly. Seniority. The United States Senate operates heavily on the principle of seniority. The longer you are there, the more power you accumulate. Seniority dictates prime committee assignments, it dictates leadership roles, and most importantly, it dictates funding priorities.
Right, bringing money back home.
Precisely. By keeping figures like Pete Domenici and Dennis Chavez in place for so long, the voters of New Mexico effectively consolidated immense institutional memory and unparalleled political leverage. A sparsely populated state suddenly punches far above its weight class because its representatives know every lever of power in the building.
The strategic value of keeping the same person in the seat is immense. But of course, the timeline also shows us that longevity wasn't just handed out to everyone who asked for it.
No, the voters were still paying attention.
Even during this age of the Titans, there are a few politicians who simply couldn't hold on to the role. We see a few one-term wonders peppered into the modern era. For instance, Republican Edwin L. Meacham. He was appointed in November 1962 to fill the vacancy when Dennis Chavez died. But the voters didn't keep him around. Mickham turned right around and lost the election to finish the term in 1964.
Another notable example of a shorter tenure in the modern era is Republican Harrison Schmitt. He successfully won the seat in 1976 and served a full term from 1977 to 1983.
But then he hits a wall.
Right. He lost his re-election bid to Jeff Bingaman, who then went on to hold the seat for the next 30 years. These examples serve as a reminder that while the era of musical chairs had ended, the electorate was still actively choosing when to grant that multi-decade stability and when to revoke it.
That active choosing by the electorate brings us directly to how this historical roadmap has shaped the modern delegation serving today.
The current landscape.
Yes, the timeline leaves us with a very distinct, unified picture of the current state of affairs. Right now, the two U.S. senators representing New Mexico are both Democrats. You have Martin Heinrich, who's been in office since January 3, 2013, having successfully defended his seat in 2018. And joining him is Ben Ray Lujan, who was elected in 2020 and officially took office on January 3, 2021.
It is a firmly established partisan alignment in the Senate.
Yeah.
And the breakdown of the state's representation goes even further. The current alignment extends right across the Capitol building to the House of Representatives as well.
Yeah, look at the House delegation.
New Mexico's current House delegation consists of Melanie Stansbury, Gabe Vasquez, and Teresa Alicia Fernandez. Every single one of them is a Democrat. It represents a complete blue wave for the state's current federal representation in Washington.
It's a stark contrast to the days of Republicans and Democrats constantly trading seats back in the 1920s. And to bring this full circle back to the mechanics of the Senate that we discussed earlier, we can look at exactly when these modern senators will face the voters again based on their assigned classes.
It's all mapped out.
The timeline maps out the modern electoral cycles perfectly.
Precisely. Because we know that Martin Heinrich occupies the Class 1 seat, we can trace that specific electoral cycle through modern history. The Class 1 cycle in New Mexico was contested in 2006, 2012, 2018, and most recently in 2024.
And since they serve 6-year terms?
Right. That means Heinrich's specific seat will not be up for a vote again until the year 2030.
And on the flip side, you have the Class 2 seat, currently held by Ben Ray Lujan. Tracing that cycle, we see it was contested in 2002, 2008, 2014, and 2020.
Following the pattern.
That means the Class 2 seat is the one slated to be determined in the upcoming 2026 election. Seeing those staggered cycles mapped out on the timeline gives you a much more practical grasp of how congressional elections actually function.
It really does.
It shows why a state never replaces its entire Senate delegation on the exact same election day.
It is the architectural design of the Senate working exactly as intended, providing that rolling continuity while still allowing for regular electoral feedback.
So what does this all mean? We started out looking at what appeared to be a standard, maybe even slightly tedious, historical table.
Spreadsheet.
A dry spreadsheet. But we uncovered an incredible narrative of political evolution. We watched a state enter the Union in 1912 and immediately face empty seats for 80 days.
The administrative lag.
We navigated the absurdity of state legislatures invalidating federal elections. We journeyed through the absolute chaos of the 1920s and 30s, where senators were resigning left and right to put on judges' robes or join the president's cabinet, creating a revolving door of representation.
A very chaotic period.
And then we saw the pendulum swing completely in the other direction. The state entered the era of the multi-decade titans figures like Dennis Chavez and Pete Domenici, who served for a combined total of over 60 years, consolidating massive power for their state. And finally, that historical roadmap led us right up to the modern, entirely Democratic delegation serving in Washington today.
It is a remarkable sweep of history captured entirely through dates and tenures, and I think it is important to make a quick, impartial note for you, the listener, as we wrap up this analysis.
Definitely.
Throughout this journey, you've heard the political pendulum swing wildly back and forth. We've detailed Republican appointments, Democratic waves, invalidated elections, and deeply contested seats. It is crucial to emphasize that our goal today has simply been to report the historical roadmap exactly as it unfolded.
We're not taking sides here.
Not at all. The changing colors and party affiliations on this timeline reflect nothing more than the evolving choices and shifting demographics of New Mexico's voters over the last century. We are merely mapping out the historical facts of who managed to secure the office, how long they held it, and the mechanics of how they departed.
Absolutely. The data tells the story, and we are just here to read the pages.
But before we officially sign off, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over on your own today.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's a conceptual thread that really sticks out when you step back and look at the entirety of this timeline. Think back to the intense volatility of the 1920s and 30s. We saw multiple powerful U.S. senators men, like Bronson M. Cutting and Sam G. Bratton, who went through the immense physical and financial effort of winning statewide elections, only to willingly abandon their Senate seats to take appointments on the U.S. Court of Appeals.
Yeah, that's still so strange to me.
Right. Today, a U.S. Senate seat is widely viewed as the absolute pinnacle of political power and influence. So you have to wonder, what exactly was happening in the political climate and the culture of early New Mexico that made an unelected judicial robe so much more appealing than wielding the power of a United States senator?
Wow.
It's a fascinating question about how our very perception of power and influence has shifted over the last 100 years.
That is such an incredible question to leave off on, and definitely something to think about the next time you see a contentious Senate race on the news. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the political history of New Mexico's senators. We hope you pulled out a few great facts, untangled the complex web of congressional classes, and have a totally new appreciation for what a simple list of names and dates can actually reveal about the mechanics of our democracy. Until next time, keep learning, keep asking questions, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.